I was sitting around with some buddies I know from college, and we were talking about all the reboots of television shows from our childhood, and how they changed the casting and so on. And this one guy says to me, I didn't know that well, and he says to me, "Well, what would you call the Jetsons if they were people of color?" And I'm like, "The Jetsons, you fucking racist." Five, four, three. CGP Video Pictures presents.
You've hit a temporal anomaly, Captain.
I hate time travel. See what time travel gets you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still alive, folks.
Yes, so the other day
we don't need an opening. Why do we need an opening? We don't fucking need one.
They know what show they're watching.
Exactly.
And in fact, it's right down there in the lower right corner what show they're watching.
Yeah. This is the day that I've had. I don't understand why the opening wouldn't play. I have no idea. I loaded it hours ago, but that's it.
You've seen it before, folks. Unless
Yes.
this is your first time. In which case, when this is over, you can watch an old episode and get to see that spectacular opening.
There you go. At any rate, enjoy it in the podcast because I'll edit it back in then.
Yeah.
Okay? Anyway, hello, Trekkers, and welcome to a fraught-filled episode of Trek Tonight. Tonight, we are doing Volume 4 of our film series, and in that, we are talking about Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Once again, I am here with my good buddies, Leo Byrne-Janicek, and of course, Captain Time Travel, Keith.
Yeah.
How are you guys? How are you? I'm having
better than the whales were in the 23rd century. But it's on a sliding scale.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it is interesting to me, Keith, because you have made it quite clear that you are not a fan of time travel stories, and yet you really like this film.
I do really like this film, and I think it's time, if you want to indulge me.
Yes.
Let's talk about my problem with time travel.
Okay.
Time travel stories, and it's not so much time. It's the way most time travel stories are done, or even more precise, is what most time travel stories are about.
Yes.
They are about changing history and then fixing the change to history.
Right.
That's not what this one show was about.
Right.
And I really have a problem with time travel shows, and I just can't get around the fact that the whole paradox thing, if you're going back in time to change history,
Yep.
and you do change history, and then you come back in time, well, then there was no reason for you to go back in time to change history anyway, so you never went back in time to change history.
Well, or you don't exist, and therefore you can't build a time machine to go back in time. So
right. So it's like, and I just don't see how I do not like that specific version of time travel stories that I don't like,
right.
Which is what most time travel stories are about.
I thought about it, Keith, a little bit in thinking of you before we got started. Because, no, seriously.
I'm sorry.
Seriously, because time travel in this particular film is just a tool.
Yes.
To get something accomplished. They have to go back in time because it's the only place these whales exist. And it could just as easily be they had to go to another planet where the whales exist. So you're right. It's not about, oh, gee, so-and-so died and we've got to go back and prevent their death, or we've got to go back and fix this thing in history. And you're right. It's not about that. It's just a means to an end. Before we get too far, though, speaking of time travel, Marty McFly
Yes.
says, now actually it's about Star Trek 4, not Star Trek 5, but he wrote, I know this is for Star Trek 5, but before you start, in Star Trek 2, what does the panel think the significance was with the book that Spock gifted Kirk, A Tale of Two Cities? Was there a message Spock held back? I don't know. What do you think of that?
Best of times, it was the worst of times.
Well, as he said, I mean, he just, other than, happy birthday, surely the
Right.
best of times.
Right.
And
well, I don't know, because Marty is right. They never really answered that or bookended that. Pardon the expression.
no, they didn't. It's interesting, but I don't have an answer. Certainly not off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Marty, maybe we'll give it some thought and discuss it at a later a later date.
Yeah. We could even post something on the Facebook page in regard to that. It's a good question, though, I've got to say, and thinking about it, I don't know. You're right. They never really answered it. They never really dealt with it. Hey, Mike Robin is here. He says, always, folks, an alternate timeline. Everything always happens. It just depends on which timeline the narrative decides to show.
Sure.
So
that is, I've heard the alternate universe theories. I've heard the alternate timelines theories, and they have never really been convincing for me.
Yeah.
Well, we're all time travelers, except it's at a steady rate in one direction. So,
right.
Exactly.
And by the way, I am aware of the irony that I have no problem with people pretending to fly around in spaceships with ray guns and transporters, but time travel is a step too far. I realize I'm aware of the irony there.
Yeah. It does make me tempted to make you a regular guest on our new show about 12 monkeys. Hey, at any rate, so should we just get right into this film? It starts yet again, and this is something that I did think of when I went to watch it. Yet again, another probe approaching Earth, hell bent on destruction of whoever is living there because they can't talk to somebody.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, all the probes Federation sent out, what kind of hell did those things reach on whatever planets they visited?
Yeah, exactly.
It is funny because this, presumably the probe, the whale probe, as it's sometimes called, presumably has a cetacean crew, whether they are humpbacks or some, variation thereof. And while we didn't need to see the inside, and I'm kind of content to have it be mysterious.
Right.
But it cruises through Federation space, causing havoc, does not, stop, doesn't try to communicate other than its message.
Right.
Why it's broadcasting it so far away is also questionable. And was it an automatic probe and it was just waiting for a response?
Right.
Or was it, or was it crude? Because at the spoiler at the end of the film, when they finally get the whales to the future, they talk to them and they just fuck off back to wherever they came from.
Right.
With nary an apology. They also don't seem to acknowledge that there's another species dominating the planet, and instead of figuring a way of talking to them.
Well, and I thought about this because in my notes, one of the things I noted, because I noted things in my notes, was the fact that my first thought was, okay, so they're neutralizing all of these Federation ships because their source is the planet Earth, if you will, because that's where the Federation is based, and maybe being upset or annoyed, much like V'ger wanting to eliminate the carbon-based units. That's why they're shutting down all the starships on their route. But they also take out 2 Klingon ships, apparently.
Yeah, so I don't think it's. So it's entirely possible. It might be an automated probe.
Yeah, and that also does beg the question: what were those 2 Klingon ships doing in Federation space?
Well, it might have. It's possible it came through. I'm going to guess that it came through Klingon space
Maybe.
for part of its journey.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know,
I had always been under the assumption that the probe was automated and that it wasn't intentionally doing anything to the ships that got near. Just its energy signature appeared to just be disruptive.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just neutralize things. Yeah, I buy that. Let me see here. I'm going to pull my notes up just to make sure that I'm not missing anything in the opening here. So the first time let's really get to the beginning. The film starts with a dedication to the Challenger,
right.
which was nice. And this was 1986. Challenger disaster was what, 84, 85? 85?
I want to say 85.
Yeah.
Either 85 or the spring of 86.
My only recollection of it was I was over having, for some odd reason, having breakfast at the cafeteria in 700 Commonwealth Avenue, which was affectionately known as the Zoo by students at BU. And that's where I first saw the news report on it. And it was an odd memory because when they were the night before talking all about the launch and the teacher that was going up and her family, and they're interviewing her, and I just felt really weird about it, like as though nobody was talking about the potential danger of the mission at all. It was just like it was nothing but a thing. And then the next day we had the disaster. So it was weird experience for me. But
so I know exactly where I was. I was working for a Greyhound track in Pueblo, Colorado.
Wow.
No, Byers, Colorado.
Okay.
And the reason I know it because it blew up on January 28, 1986.
Yep.
Which was my birthday.
Oh.
Ooh, yikes.
Ooh.
Yes.
Not fun. Yeah.
Not fun. Yeah.
So anyway, the USS Saratoga is the first one to see the probe coming.
Right.
And they make a report to Starfleet about it, but they haven't been affected by it yet.
Right.
And then we jump into the extradition request of a Klingon ambassador for Admiral James T. Kirk.
But hold on one second before we leave Saratoga.
Yeah.
I've basically read somewhere that captain of Saratoga.
Yep.
Is the first on-screen female captain we ever had in Star Trek.
Oh, could be. Sure.
And also the first one of color.
Yes.
So, and she was played by Madge Sinclair, who also appeared in Roots, as well as doing the voice of Simba's mom in The Lion King.
Yeah. Now, this guy who plays the Klingon,
John Schuck,
was a very popular character actor of the time.
Wasn't he in Holmes and Yo-Yo?
Yes, he was in Holmes and Yo-Yo. Yeah.
He was also in Macmillan and Wife.
Yep.
Which is where I remember him from. First remember seeing him in.
Yeah. Yeah. He was, I don't know what happened to him later on, but he was in a lot of stuff in the 80s.
Yeah, he was one of those guys who worked a lot. He was, sort of and when you're sort of a tall, sort of kind of slightly goofy looking dude,
right,
and your name is Schuck, you got to lean into it,
right.
And I think he did. I think he, I don't think he was like, why aren't I why isn't Paramount calling me to open a picture? I mean, he knew he was a character actor,
right,
but he worked a lot, which is a lot of character actors do,
right.
Because everybody's, well, we want a so and so type, well, let's get him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then Sarek steps in. The Klingon, puts up this whole case for why Kirk is the principal villain in this situation, and how he, stole a Klingon ship and killed Klingons, and and then was responsible while we were negotiating peace for the design of the Genesis torpedo, which would, was built to annihilate the Klingon race.
I'm sorry, you can't trust a word Sarek says, because the Vulcans are well known to be the intellectual lapdogs of the Federation.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
believe it's puppets.
It is
Puppets.
puppets.
That's
Yeah.
intellectual puppets. That's right.
Yes. Did you notice that when the president of the Federation says, "No, I'm sorry, we've heard this, and Admiral Kirk is up on 9 counts of Starfleet regulations, and he's outraged.
Starfleet
Regulations, that's preposterous." But did you ever notice, and the only reason I noticed it was because of closed captioning, that when he storms out, someone in the crowd shouts, "Pop his ass."
I
didn't
not.
know it. I only noticed it because I had closed captioning on as well.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, I rewound it like 2 or 3 times just to make sure. I'm like, wait a minute, did somebody really say "pop his ass"? But yeah, apparently they did. At any rate, so and then we get to we shoot over to Vulcan, where the crew of the Enterprise has been on a 3-month what's the term?
Furlough.
Exile. 3 months of
Exile. Yes.
And there we see it. Now, I will say the one thing that hasn't aged well of this film, and it's because I don't think, as much as it's well loved, that anybody has gone back and spruced up the graphics.
No.
So when you look at this matte painting, it really looks to me like a matte painting.
It definitely does, especially because both the ship and the background are painted, except for maybe the gangplank.
Right. And I wanted to point out, by the way, any of our podcast listeners, we do put up photographs on the video blog version of this show. If you ever think, gee, I wish I could have seen what they were showing, just hop over to YouTube or Facebook, like Friday or so, and you can catch the show there and see some of these visuals, because I like to try to have some nice visuals. But at any rate, I think actually, I don't know if let me see if I have a picture of it. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I think the 10th count of Starfleet regulations might have been the fact that they introduced the Papa Smurf hat to the people of Vulcan,
which are cheaper than making latex ears.
Yeah. Did you see all those guys in the background with the Papa Smurf hats?
Yeah, they look more gnomey than Papa Smurf specifically, because they are red mix. They do kind of rocking a garden gnome sort of aesthetic.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of sort of Asian touches, at least in the last 2 films.
I can sort of see it in the corner there.
Oh yeah, you can see it behind Scotty and behind Scotty.
I thought I had a better picture of it, but I don't really. But
yeah, those guys are bopping all over the place.
You get a pretty good look at the guy behind Scotty's would be Scotty's right ear.
Yeah. Hey, Scott Taylor is here. Gave us a thumbs up. That's nice.
Hi, Scott. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you for joining the program. So all right, let's get where we are now here. We know now the crew is there. They've been on Vulcan for 3 months. They renamed the ship the HMS Bounty. I'm
pretty sure USS Bounty or just Bounty.
It says.
Does it say HMS?
Yep. Hang on.
They are history nerds on the Enterprise, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought I also had a close up of them all standing there, but yeah, see it's an HMS. You can't really tell because it's behind.
Yes.
Yeah, but one could argue that's the top of a U or an H, but it is. I'm pretty sure it's the HMS Bounty. And Spock is also finishing the retraining of his mind, where he gets stumped by the final question of how do you feel? And he's talking to his mother, and his mother says, well, the computer knows you're half human, and she talks about how his friends all went against things that were good for them in order to rescue him because they felt that was more important. Again, another play on the needs of the many expression. And then he, of course, says to his mother, well, since you consider them of value, I will consider my feelings.
Also played by Jane Wyatt, who played his mother in the original series, which is, I always like seeing the legacy characters come back when the actors are, around as they was. And it wasn't that long. It was about 15 years.
Right.
Or so after her one and only appearance in Journey to Babel.
Right.
But, we've lost actors, before and since.
Right.
But it's always nice to see. You'll note that Chekhov has a very spiffy new ensemble, leather jacket and black turtleneck.
I was going to mention that. Yes.
He ditched the spacey sort of Lord Fauntleroy outfit he'd been saddled with in the previous movie.
Yep.
Apparently they have a very good, I'm going to say a good sort of vintage clothing store on Vulcan, where he was able to pick up these decidedly non-Vulcan threads.
Right.
That might have been
clearly there was a better men's shop on Vulcan.
Apparently.
Yeah.
But I do I liked his look, and especially it turns out to be very handy where they're going, and more especially when they're going.
Yes.
So
Marty says he loved the mystery of the beginning of the film. The first act was riveting in the theater. So yeah,
because nobody knew what was going on.
Right.
I remember, as much as I enjoyed it the first time I saw it, I was a little disappointed that they spent so much time in the 20th century. Spoiler for this movie that's been out for 30 years or something like that.
John Van Gosteen says, I still wear the headband. That's great. Yeah, that was
a headband. Good on you. But
Nimoy covers his ears.
One of the things I always want to see more of what the Federation is like, and not just on a starship. And I always feel like we never quite get as much. We never really got that in the movies.
Yeah.
Although I think we got, I'm going to say in Picard, however you feel about it, we got to see sort of the Federation in through a non-Starfleet lens, which I found interesting. So
yeah, but you did see more of it through the later shows.
Yeah.
Which is true. So they decide, they all agree that they're going to go back and face the charges against them. And so they rev up fix up the bird of prey. Scotty's been working on it, something about what's the line about
Klingon food packs is that they give him a sour stomach.
Yeah.
And Kirk, who never lets an opportunity to sort of throw a little shade at his crew, goes, oh, is that what that was?
Yeah. Yeah. But the other one that I was thinking of was, I forget what he says, something about getting the ship ready. And he says, something is something, but reading Klingon, that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember what first part of that line was.
Sort of interesting is, and this could have been Scotty mucking about.
Yeah.
But the layout of the bridge is very different from the last movie.
Yes.
The captain's chair is no longer on like a sort of a, let's call it a mound of glory or a platform above his crew. It's, and the two stations, it looks more like you took a Klingon ship and sort of federized it.
Yes.
If that's a word, and it isn't.
I noticed that about the captain's chair. I don't know. What did you think of that, Keith?
I think that was I'm with I'm with Leo on this one. I think it was Scotty mucking about. I mean, these guys are going to be flying this thing home. Right. So yeah, it makes sense that they would convert into something that they recognized and knew how to operate.
Yeah.
So I think Scotty was mucking about.
I noticed that they were clever enough in their overall design of the set that early on you see a shot of the wall where the escape hatch is and the ladder to climb out of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess that makes sense. They would have built that into the set because they knew they needed it. Yeah. But it was just interesting to see that was there before you ever knew they needed to use it. So it was kind of cool. Anywho, so yeah, so they start to fly back to Earth.
Also, just as a note, this
Yes,
is the last time we get to see Lieutenant Savick, who
yes,
stays with Amanda. They're both standing on a rocky outcropping, watching the bounty fly off. But as we discussed this a little bit last week. Yep, there they are.
Yep.
Spock and Savick had some pond farm madness
yep,
back on the Genesis planet. And originally there was a storyline where she was carrying Spock's child.
right.
It was never addressed, but it is kind of interesting that she doesn't go back. She stays on Vulcan
Yeah.
with Spock's mom.
Now, if you look at that picture, that belt is pretty tight.
Well, she's not showing yet.
But it was interesting because until they show that long shot, I noticed they never showed her in any less than a 2/3 close-up. So she's you never see below her chest in any of the close-up shots of her in the film when she's talking to Kirk, and then again when she's talking to Spock. And they do have sort of a Vulcan-y tense, like, is there more to this exchange between each other when they wish each other, well.
We'll never know. It's not.
Right.
It's never been addressed on screen, which is what I can sort of consider canon.
Right.
For
maybe
whatever.
Cue the fan fiction.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe, or there's something maybe that they could throw out as a joke in Lower Decks.
Maybe. Well, we've got a new season coming up, so
yeah.
So they take off back to Earth, right?
Right.
And they intercept the message that this probe has arrived at Earth and everything's going, sideways.
Right.
And by the way, here's a little Easter egg in the Starfleet headquarters, sort of like, nerve center with all the screens and everything. Yep. There's a table that like some of the lower ranking people are huddled around.
Yes.
That is they converted that prop to be the table in engineering in Next Generation, which came out about a year after this. It was referred to as the pool table. And just another little gem is they're speaking to this alien communications officer, a woman with sort of like short black hair.
Right.
That was let me make sure. Notes, come on, scroll down, you son of a bitch. Jane Whedon from the Go-Go's played that character.
Okay.
Was listed in the credits as alien communications officer, but she was the name of the character was Trillia.
Interesting.
So I was from in my mind, because I know Nimoy has a connection to the Bangles, who were around the same time.
Oh, that's cool.
And he appeared in one of their videos, and for some reason I thought it was like one of the Bangles, but it was one of the Go-Go's. So I'm getting my girl bands of the 80s conflated.
Gotcha.
But that was kind of a neat little little moment for her, and she's apparently also a big Star Trek fan in real life.
Oh, neat. I didn't know that.
She had a good experience shooting. She said Nimoy was an excellent director and made her feel very comfortable. So
nice.
Neat.
Nice. Okay, so I'm just looking for something. So we they start heading towards Earth, and there's a lot of little banter back and forth between McCoy and Kirk and Spock. They start to get close to Earth, and Uhura starts to say that she's noticing a lot of communications back and forth, and it's almost a gibberish, and she's going to try to sort it out. And Spock is listening to it, and McCoy comes over and says, "Oh, I'm really glad to have your Katra back where it belongs, and I could never fill your shoes," and typical Spock stuff of my shoes.
Yes.
But they get into this thing where McCoy wants to talk about what it was like to have died and come back. And Spock says, "Well, I can't really discuss it with you without a common frame of reference."
I loved McCoy's response to that. You mean I have to die to discuss your thoughts on death?
Yeah, yeah. But they end up. My favorite is when he says, "Excuse me, doctor, I'm receiving many distress calls," and McCoy says, "I know, no doubt you are." You know, something like that. But at any rate, so basically, they end up getting the message that this probe is attacking the Earth, and it's focused on the Earth's oceans, and it's vaporizing the oceans. And they don't know what to do with it because they don't know how to communicate with it. And then, of course, in typical, Captain Kirk Enterprise bridge crew style, they figure it out pretty quickly.
Yes.
It's whales, and the whales are extinct, and
specifically humpback whales.
Yeah, humpback whales. And those are extinct on Earth, so there's no one to answer the probe. And so they come up with this plan to go back in time and find some humpback whales and bring them to the future. And of course, McCoy, thinks that that's a crazy idea. I'm trying to see. I have, where is it here? Oh my. This is the part I cut out in the podcast.
Let him have it raw. Let him have it raw.
Where is it? Is this it?
See what you missed by not tuning in live?
Oh, no, that's talking about life and death.
Life and death, yes.
Yeah, I had that great shot of somewhere in here. This is what happens when you have too many pics. Of there it is. No, wait just a darn minute. When they first decide they're going to go back through time. So they decide they're going to do that, and Spock has to come up with the calculations for time travel.
Yeah.
And Scotty says that he can build Kirk a tank in the cargo bay. Are you planning on taking a swim? They're going to no, it's humpbacks. Humpback people. Yeah. So they're going to bring the humpback whales back with them. And then they have that sort of, I love it. They start to go through the slingshot around the sun bit, and they just can't help themselves. They've got to go back and have that very strange CG sequence with the different heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Floating at you, and the bodies flying through water, and I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it was.
They just can't help themselves. They've got to get to a touch of that Star Trek: The Motion Picture crap.
It's a little 2001 too, like a little weird sort of trippy moment. It's over fairly quickly, and we get back to
and we get back to shenanigans.
Yeah. So up to this point, any thoughts, guys? Anything specific you wanted to bring up?
It's weird because I'm trying to separate. Like I hadn't watched this one in quite a while.
Okay.
Not out of any dislike. It's just one that, for some reason, like occasionally, like I'll flip around and be like, "Oh, Wrath of Khan," and that gets a lot of airtime. Star Trek 4 doesn't get as much airtime, although it is very beloved.
Yes.
So
at the time, it was my favorite of the movies.
It was the 5th highest grossing movie of that year.
Wow.
Which is pretty remarkable, although, something like somewhere between $60 and $80 million, I believe, was the take, which was back then quite a chunk of change.
Yeah.
Of course, you have to, inflate, fix it for inflation. I'm not sure how much that would be today, but it would be, much more. It was, if the music also, one of the things I noticed in watching this, it doesn't rely on a lot of the same musical sort of bits that we're used to. It felt like a mostly original soundtrack.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was. It's definitely got its own sound.
I kept meaning to look this up, but it sounds a lot like the soundtrack to the first animated Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings film. It has a little, like the way you can sort of listen. If anybody's listening and wants to look it up for us and confirm that, it had a very similar sort of tone. There was like a lot of brass, and it in listening to it, it was sort of like, yeah, I remember it, but it also was like a little jarring because it didn't feel. I'm not saying it's not Star Trek, but it felt a little different. It had a slightly different vibe to it.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, Nimoy was the director for this, and I do remember reading. I mean, I read recently that he was trying to tell a fun story that did not involve space battles and phaser battles, and maybe would have a big idea or two in it.
Gotcha.
So he was trying something that they. Has every Star Trek movie other than this one, and the motion picture. I'm just trying to think now. Have they all featured space battles, with the exception of this one and the other one, and motion picture?
Well, I mean, there was a space battle between the Klingons and V'ger, albeit brief.
Right. Yeah, there really is.
Yeah, this is a
one in the motion picture.
I mean, Wrath of Khan had a fair amount of action, as did Search for Spock.
Right.
This was a very totally a very different sort of film. It's weird because it is the fate of humanity, and the Federation. I mean, who knows what this probe would have done had they not accomplished the mission? Earth probably would have been pretty screwed.
Right.
But while the stakes were extremely high, it still had a very, how can I put it? Like, it didn't feel like, even though the world was coming to end in the future, it didn't have that like, oh my God, the Earth's going to blow up kind of feel. Like it had this very sort of gentle, I don't know, it's not a meandering feel, but it did like they were all urgent, but it didn't feel like urgent, like it was a military mission. It felt like urgent, like we have to do this important thing.
Right.
Yeah, there were a lot of lighthearted moments in this. Movie.
Yes. Yeah. And we will get to those lighthearted moments after we come back from these commercial messages.
Don't touch that dial.
Yep. Whoop.
Come on, sponsors. Imagine.
We're scouring the country looking for Miss USA. She's got to be perfect. Could it be you? Or maybe you?
The search is on. This year, there's more excitement, more surprises, and a brand new host. Join William Shatner for Miss USA live this Friday.
Right here on CBS.
Hello, I'm William Shatner, and I'm a shaman. I'm a conduit of the ancient forces of nature. You're no doubt wondering, hey, Shatner, how do I hurl bolts of lightning? Simple. Get World of Warcraft, dog. You can be anyone you want. I'm William Shatner, and I'm a shaman. What's your game?
World of Warcraft, the #1 online game. Try it for free at warcraft.com.
Rated T for Teen.
So how did it go?
Well, Dad, I spent my childhood living with monks learning the art of deal making.
You mastered monkey-style kung fu.
No, Priceline is different now. Faster and easier to save on hotels. You don't even have to bid.
Master Khan taught you all that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and he says to say, Nejo Dunkoi Mun.
Your accent needs a little work. You keep getting me killed. I thought you had my back.
Oh, not again. Hold on just a minute. Okay. No. We're both too old for this kind of thing.
Star Trek, the video game.
All right, now you're overacting.
Wow.
That Miss USA one came off a little creepy.
Oh yeah.
It did. I was cringing a little bit at that one there.
Oh yeah. Will it be you? Yeah.
Get out of my
Yeah.
house.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
But I love the one with him and the Gorn.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember that one.
I
I
remember that.
that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
he's not
remember
really
the
upset.
I remember
Yeah.
the Priceline commercials. And
Yeah.
I remember her being in some of them, but I don't remember that specific Priceline commercial.
I don't either, and I
I'm
really
not sure
like
I
it.
do either, but
Yeah.
it was fun to watch.
And that's really his daughter.
No, that's Kaylee Cuoco from
That's what I thought.
Big Bang
Big
Theory.
Bang Theory. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So
Anyway,
But-
yeah.
one of the things that's interesting because the character of the cetaceanologist, played by Catherine Hicks,
Yes.
there was a version of the script that Eddie Murphy was attached to. And he's going to be like this UFO conspiracy theory guy who gets up, sort of gets mixed up with them and helps them out, presumably.
Right.
Part of me would like to see that, but I also feel like you put Eddie Murphy, especially that was Eddie Murphy at the height of his popularity.
Right. Right.
Saturday Night Live, he was very hot at the time.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if it would have been hard to give him enough time and not let him sort of overshadow the Star Trek.
Right.
You think he would have stolen the show?
He might have.
I think he might have. Yeah, I agree.
I mean, it depends on how it was written and how it was directed and edited. But because he was such a star, it would be like you don't want to waste him. You're paying to have Eddie Murphy in this thing. You want to have him in there, but you also don't want it to sort of derail the Star Trek of it. Having an actress who is, this might have been the first time I've seen her. I know she's done other stuff. She was on Seventh Heaven with Stephen Collins, also of Star Trek lineage.
Right.
In a way, she's less distracting.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because the first scene where they land in Golden Gate Park, and you see the garbage men there, that has, I had in my notes here that it really tapped into a Close Encounters kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And that was very popular at the time. So maybe that's a remnant of Eddie Murphy's UFO character.
Maybe. I mean, that could play it. What's sort of interesting is that in that big field that nobody ever used it while they were there.
I kept wondering that too, going, what, I'll just hand wave this one by.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get too hung up on it. Again, like any criticism we have are superficial only because we all of this movie. So don't send us angry tweets or emails or anything else.
Nobody threw a frisbee and had it bounce off an invisible section of the ship.
Yeah. Nobody's dog bonked into it or anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Well, I will say, so you say, you know, any criticisms we have, and I will say, for me, and I think Leo's disagreed with me on this before, but for me personally, Jillian is the weakest part of the film. Her performance to me is kind of up and down. She has moments where she does a great job, and then there are other moments where she delivers lines and they're just so flat. You know, one of them I wrote down here was, you know, and so that, as they say, is that. And it sounds so unnatural to me that I feel like somehow or other she wasn't as comfortable in this part as she could have been.
it's possible. I've never read any interviews with her talking about this, so I can't speak to
Right.
how she enjoyed or not enjoyed her experience here.
Right.
Although it certainly put her, like we knew who she was after that. So
Right.
I'm sure it was.
I
Good
loved
for
her
her.
truck, though. I love the fact that she had that broken down crap ass truck that had problems with its power steering and just made all kinds of terrible noises when she drove it around. It was really, it rang very true for someone who was a cetacean biologist to not be able to afford anything more than that truck.
That's true.
Yeah.
You know, I was just thinking about what you were saying, Chris, about the Jillian character being the weakest character, but except for the Star Trek gang, almost nobody else has any other than an occasional passing line. Right. Jillian's the only other one, at least when we go back in time, who has any kind of screen time.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and it's interesting because because they need to recharge the dilithium crystals, and they need some radiation bleed, and they go on the Enterprise, and it's check out her. It also seems like somebody might be like, don't send the Russian guy at this time. I mean, otherwise it would be. It's much funnier if he does it, obviously.
Right.
Looking for the nuclear vessels, but he gets caught, and her gets out.
Right.
With the goods, and he's talking to this FBI guy, who also drops that whole thing. The woman who says, "Well, I don't really know how to get. I think they're in Alameda." And he, I think she was somebody who worked on the. I was reading that she was somebody who worked on the picture, and they just had her going to have her come in, and she wasn't going to say anything. Right. But her bit was so good, they decided to keep it, and she had to join SAG as a result.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
So I'm sure the other extras were probably a little annoyed. There he is, booking his way across the deck of the what was supposed to be the Enterprise, but is in fact the Ranger. And apparently, if you freeze frame at points, you can see Keith, who is the real naval buff of the group, said there's a difference between the towers of the Enterprise and the Ranger. There's the Enterprise, the Ranger was before.
Yeah, so that's the Enterprise has a very different island in the middle than the ship they use. And in the green room before, Keith pointed out that when you see it in the film, and let me see if I can find this picture, Uhura's head is often blocking the I had it before. Uhura's head is often blocking the part of the island in the middle, so that you can't really see that it's not the same kind of island that's on the Enterprise.
Yeah, but I still noticed it right away. And when I was because I was a Navy nerd at that time,
right?
And I was going. I saw that one. That is not the Enterprise. I didn't know what ship it was, but I knew that was not the Enterprise.
So, but the FBI guy, I thought talking about it, and I don't want to malign this actor whose name I can't tell you. Yeah, but he's like. He goes, well, he's a Rusky. Of course he's a Rusky, but he's a Rusky R word, a word we generally don't say anymore.
Right.
And you're like, wow, that didn't age well. I mean, he was not supposed to be a good guy.
No.
Kind of a goon.
But
he's still like, oof, that didn't age well.
People still threw that word around, though, an awful lot in the 80s.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That was a perfectly acceptable word to use in the 1980s.
Yeah. Great moment to me was, of course, the moment when they're going on the tour of the whales. They've discovered that there are these two whales at the Cetacean Institute, and they could just get those whales. There they are in one confined space. They just beam them up, and as Kirk says, and consider themselves lucky. And of course, Spock has to go and mind meld with the whale for some reason by diving in the tank. And one of my favorite lines is the little old lady who say they don't know what the whales are singing about. And she says, well, maybe he's talking to that man. And that, of course, is Spock swimming in the tank.
It is funny to watch Shatner's whole thing when he looks up and sees Spock.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe some of his hammiest moments right there. Like, he's really mugging it up.
Yeah. Well, you can see a bit of it in that picture. Look at the intensity on his face. He's like, oh my God, what is Spock doing in there? And the nun's just enjoying it.
Okay.
Yeah. She's just like,
I guess this is part of the tour.
The fish. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, and then of course, they Jillian goes running up to the deck and gets all mad at them and kicks them out of the Cetacean Institute and what have you. So, and then they do end up running into each other later on, while walking around.
They're walking back to
and somehow or other, she just feels I don't know what, attached to them somehow.
This is the second of her hard luck cases.
Yeah, so she gives them a lift into town.
Yeah.
And
drops Spock off back in the ship,
right?
The invisible ship, and she and Shatner go out to dinner.
Now we did miss, we skipped one of the most iconic moments, and that
two, yes.
Yes.
And the punk on the bus was Kirk Thatcher, who was actually a producer, one of the producers on the film. And from what I understood, I'm not sure where I read this in an article. I read it somewhere, but apparently Nimoy originally had wanted some rock song, some hard rock song. And Thatcher said, no, it's not obnoxious enough. He's like, I have a punk band. And he did. He had a punk band.
Yeah.
He goes, let me write the song and I'll play the part. And that's what happened.
Yeah. Spock neck pinches him.
Right.
And the entire bus applauds.
Yes.
Which today, I think people might not react the same way. Although the thing is, since, boom boxes are your grandpa's mode of listening to music.
Yeah.
Speaking as a bus driver, if I can hear the music sitting up front, I make an announcement going, everybody, please turn your music down so that you're the only ones who can hear it. If I could still hear the music, I go, I need whoever has their music up, and I already know by this time who has their music up.
Right.
You need to turn your music down, or your ride is over, and that's all the warnings they get. I will then pull over, and you're out of here.
Yeah. So you don't canvass the crowd to ask if there are any Vulcans that could neck pinch the guy.
I might start doing that because that would mean less paperwork for me if there were.
Right.
Because when I do you're out of here, I got paperwork to fill out for that.
I think you would be. I think if there was a Vulcan, there would be a lot of paperwork in your future.
Possibly. Yes. Hey, this is a great picture that I found with Shatner and the guy playing the punk with Kirk Thatcher sitting there next to each other. Obviously, something they took, for the fun of it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And he did make an appearance in Picard season 2.
He did. He moved to L.A.
And he
of being neck pinched by Vulcans in San Francisco.
But I think it made him a little less confrontational, if I recall.
Yes, it did. It did. So.
But I felt like everybody got a little bit of business, because oftentimes, Sulu or her or Chekhov tend to sort of have a couple of lines and not a lot to do. Chekhov gets captured and then he gets injured, and we get the rescue. Uhura was with him on that, but Sulu gets to fly a helicopter, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Like he's talking to the pilot, looking at it, it's like an old Huey. He says, "Oh, it must be pretty ancient for you." He says, "Oh yeah."
Yeah. But interesting.
There was a bit shot where he bumps into a little boy walking with his either his mom or his grandfather,
Uh-huh.
and it turns out it's his great 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 grandfather, who he was named after. And the novelization is the first time we hear Sulu's first name, Akira, who is it's never mentioned in the old series,
Right.
and that's where it was first mentioned, and that's where it became canon after that. So
I thought it was something with an H.
Hikaru? I thought it was.
Was it Hikaru? Oh, that was his grandfather was Akira. Yeah, Hikaru Sulu. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I did think to myself, so he goes and he's talking to the guy who has the helicopter, and he said, he's saying, oh, I flew something similar to this in my academy days, and they're chit-chatting. Mind if I ask you a few questions? And then somehow or other, he just gets the helicopter.
Well, yeah, there's a scene missing where I don't know. Like it's never established if this is a helicopter that the plexiglass company they're at uses to deliver stuff.
Oh.
It seems like a very expensive way to deliver it.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was just on his own at an airfield, although there was like a lot of business going on in the background.
Yeah.
It was not established. I don't know how he paid for it because they got $100 for the glasses that McCoy gave him. Wasn't that a gift from Dr. McCoy? That's the beauty part. They will be again.
Right.
Which, by the way, forgive me, but that's the only real paradox in the whole in the whole show. It's
a paradox with a flaw, Keith, because in the original film, the McCoy in the director's cut makes a comment about how difficult it is to find a pair of 18th century eyeglasses with the lenses intact. And when he goes to sell them, the lenses are cracked from his battle with Khan. So technically the lenses should not be intact. But
presumably it was replaced sometime in between the two.
Yeah. So that's an interesting. When you talk about paradoxes, there is a flaw in that paradox, but that's all right.
But everybody
go ahead, Leo.
Everybody gets a bit of business.
Right. Especially McCoy and Scotty, who have one of the best bits of business, I think, in the whole thing, where they pretend to be Professor Scott touring the Plexicore facility with Dr. McCoy as his assistant. Don't bury yourself in the part. But basically, I love it, and I love that in order to get the plexiglass to build the tank for free, they give him the formula for transparent aluminum. And again, paradox time.
That's just it. It's not necessarily. We don't know if that's a paradox or not.
Right.
And by the way, and that's one of the reasons I like this show, because they just didn't worry about the whole am I changing history anything. I don't mind time travel stories when the time travelers just participate in history.
Right.
And I just loved it. It's like Doctor Who. We're not going to worry about that.
Yeah. No, it's great. Well, how do we know he didn't invent the damn thing?
Yeah.
And as it turns out, he did. Here we have Forbes magazine, December 7th, 1993. The man who invented transparent aluminum. And there he is. America's newest billionaire. Rich beyond the dreams of avarice.
Yes, there is they have come up with a transparent aluminum, apparently, or something very much like it.
Yeah.
Recently, like within the last year, I read an article about that. I can't remember any of the details other than it happened. So Google it if you want to know more about transparent aluminum.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of nice business in Scotty working on an old Apple, what was it, an Apple Mac Pro or something?
Well, I don't have the picture, but it's actually the original Mac.
It is, but it's not the very first one, but it's one of the slightly later models.
I don't know. I don't have it in this picture. There was another one I didn't clip, and it looked very much like the one I bought.
It did, but it has a different sort of little logo thing on it.
All right.
But it's not far. too many generations away from the one that we used to have back in the day.
Yeah. Well, this is 90s. This is 86, and the Apple Mac came out in 84, so it's 2 years old.
So, but I love Scotty talking to the mouse, computer, and he's wants to use the keyboards. Quaint. Now, much like all computers in movies and TV shows, they can do anything. Because all the stuff he's typing in, it's just like, it's not like he wrote out just on one thing, the formula. All these other screens are popping in and out.
Yeah.
And machines back then didn't open that quick. Like, things did not work that quick. Believe me.
Right.
There's a lot of load time waiting.
I just noticed that he's wearing a button that says "I quit smoking."
Yeah.
That's so
another
funny.
little
Not
message
now, Madeline.
in by Star Trek.
Yeah.
But it was a cool scene. I agree.
Yeah.
And Scotty, of course, sort of straddles between the three leads, and he's like the top of the heap of the second tier cast members.
Right.
He's sometimes he's sort of an ancillary member of the best friends gang.
Right.
But I was glad everybody sort of got a moment. Also, when they go to rescue Chekhov from the hospital.
Yes.
And the only time we see them use a phaser in any capacity is Kirk locks these doctors in to a closet and uses the phaser to seal the fuse the lock.
Right. He melted the lock.
And I do love McCoy giving an old lady a pill, and she regrows her kidney.
I love that. Look, gave me a pill, and I've got a new kidney.
Yeah. And there's all these people around, all these doctors around her, but also the fact she says, "I'm doing dialysis." What is this? The Dark Ages?
Yeah. McCoy is just in his grouchy element.
Oh yeah,
he was himself around.
He was loving that. He was definitely loving doing all that, and it's a delight to watch DeForest Kelley get all sort of, outraged and cranky about stuff.
Yes,
the two young doctors, they're like interns or something, or are joking about something, and he's like, "Oh, sounds like them." Spanish Inquisition. Yeah.
You have a differing opinion, doctor?
Oh man. Yeah. But I especially like that. It's funny too. It almost takes on a Benny Hill quality.
Yeah, like that.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's very weird because they've got Chekhov on the gurney, and they're running around, and it's a lot of people tripping over stuff, and it's very, very slapsticky.
Well,
they get out
when they first to get into the operating room, they've got Jillian on the table, and she's moaning and groaning, and he basically says to them, the technical word for cramps, which I thought was great. I forget what it is. Upper, I don't know.
Gastro. I can't remember exactly, but it was just. I mean, it sounded really serious. I mean, it would, but we're sort of glossing over a lot of stuff. But there's a lot of really nice bits with everybody. Also, who can forget Double Dumbass on You?
Double Dumbass on You, right?
And
Spock trying to swear.
Yeah.
You're
not the hell your whales.
Not the hell your whales. Probably might be my favorite line in the movie.
Could be.
But they get back, and they're putting in the thing, and he's like, she finally gives him the code of the transmission. Oh, we lost Chris.
Uh-oh.
I guess the probe is somewhere near Delaware.
Yes,
so
indeed.
She finally gives Kirk the frequency that they can track the whales, and the whales have been set free now up in Alaska.
Yeah, she didn't
earlier,
know.
sort of like they did it during the night, and she said, "I didn't even get to say goodbye to them." She slaps the guy. Apparently, that actor, she really slapped him, and he did not know that was going to happen. He was apparently a little annoyed, but he was eventually a good sport about it. And he looks genuinely shocked after she slaps him and tells him off, and walks away. So he's like, "I can't take you with me. There's nothing for you in the future. There's nothing for me to hear. You're going to need a whale scientist." And she's not wrong, but they're beaming
Yeah.
Kirk out, and she hugs him and gets beamed up with him. And
Surprise!
and they go zooming off into to Alaska, which takes 12 minutes, I think it was, from San Francisco, which is extraordinarily good time, I would
Yes.
say. And
And tailwind.
they find the whales, but there's a whaling ship, and they were supposed to be Russians, but apparently the ship was a Finnish ship in real life, and they were like, so, and the Finns aren't notorious whalers, so but it's fine. Who cares? That's just a little nugget of.
I was pretty sure that vessel was too small to be a whaling ship. It looked like some kind of fishing trawler, or some kind of fishing boat to me too. But
I would think a whaler would need to be a lot larger. But again, who cares? He's come back.
Wouldn't be a night with technical problems if I didn't have to disappear. Anyway, you were talking about the trawler. One of my favorite bits.
Yeah.
Especially when it shows up.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Just looking at that, I'm pretty sure that's not a whaling ship.
Right.
No,
it
that
looks pretty small.
It is too small. But again, I'm like, who cares?
Right.
It also emphasizes the largeness of a Klingon bird of prey versus some sort of terrestrial seagoing vessel.
Right.
But they fire the harpoon, and it hits something invisible, and they're like turning that wheel like it's a Trans Am.
Right.
Which is fair. I think if I was at sea shooting at whales and I saw something like that suddenly appear, I think I'd be going, let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Yep. Agreed. But they beam the whales up, and they're like, okay, great. Now we have to go back to the future, with apologies to Marty McFly. And as Spock is trying to calculate, like, now that they have the whales and the water and how it's going to affect the speed of the ship. And he says, there are too many variables. I can't figure it out.
Right.
And Spock, Kirk is basically like, says something. I've forgotten exactly what Kirk says. And Spock is
best guess.
Make your best guess.
I know. I think he just says, that's extraordinary.
Yeah. And he walks away.
When he says he has to calculate all those things.
And Spock is feeling like, I can't.
On a thumbs up.
He says, I don't understand what it means. He says, he means that your guesses are, he trusts your guesses more than he trusts other people's facts.
Yeah.
So he punches it in, and they do make it back to Earth just in the moment when they left, and they crash into San Francisco Bay, but they have to get the whales out, and the Klingon bird of prey is sinking. Shatner does a heroic swim to manually open the doors.
Right.
And the whales go out, and they start singing, and the probe is like, oh, okay, cool, and just fucks off, leaving a lot of destruction. But what's sort of interesting is they all climb out of the bird of prey because it's sinking.
Right.
And there's this very joyous moment with everybody. But if you notice, Spock is laughing at this moment.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if that was the best take they had.
Scotty in this picture looks like somebody hit him in the face with a pan.
He does a little like he just got splashed, and he's like, what? But there was a lot of wind going on, so he may have gotten an eyeful of water.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to watch because they're all like pushing each other in the water, and they're like sort of like kids.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of points where you see I'm going to say Nimoy. That's why, because I feel like Nimoy was sort of caught up in the moment.
Yeah.
And while this is certainly, Spock has gone through like a life. He had a big sort of life change at the end of Motion Picture. Then he dies and he comes back. He's not quite himself. And this is, by the end of the picture, he's sort of more himself than he had been previously. Sure. But and
he really tries in this film to master the colorful metaphors.
Yes.
With the hell you don't, the hell you do. And
Never
Perhaps
quite
it's
getting
time
it.
for a colorful metaphor.
yeah. Oh my.
But there are a lot
Yeah,
of
so
wonderful.
they got the whales there. I always liked the fact that in the beginning, when right before Kirk and company go to make their jump, and they've just been talking to the Federation about how they're going to attempt time travel,
Yeah.
and you see that shot of Sarek and the president of the Federation staring at the shattered glass that's just exploded with the wind and the rain whipping at them. And it's a pretty tight shot to the one that happens when they land. And then all of a sudden, Sarek is still looking out that window and he goes, there they are. And he points to the ship landing. It was a pretty good cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, so now it is they're sort of facing their charges in front of the Federation Council. There's a lot of, grand poobahs, and Spock stands with them. They're like, well, Captain Spock, you're not accused of anything. He says,
right.
I will stand with my shipmates.
Yes.
And all of the charges are dropped except for one against Kirk. And for that, he is reduced in rank to captain.
Yep.
And basically given command of a new ship as a reward for all his shenanigans.
Yes. And I love it. They're all in the shuttle, and they're making jokes about how they're probably going to get a freighter or a garbage scow or something. And then somebody's, I think it's Sulu, is I'm hoping for the Excelsior. No, why would you want that bucket of bolts? I think that's actually what's being said in this picture that I've got.
I think it is too. I think.
Yeah. And of course they sail towards the Excelsior, but then fly over it and see the Enterprise A.
Yes.
Enterprise A.
Yeah. The first in a long line of alphabetized NCC numbers.
Yes. One of the things.
Now, what do you think, guys? Did they just dig up another Constitution class ship and just paint a new name on it?
I actually read about this.
Did you?
They actually blew up the model for.
No, I know that.
And then they built a new one because the guy who built the new model, he basically wanted to modernize. He wanted to modernize the model.
Right.
So they built a brand new model.
No, I didn't mean about the FX guys. I knew about the fact that the guy who did this model hated Doug Trumbull and wanted to blow up his Enterprise. I knew that.
I have a story sort of about that, but let's.
What I mean is the Federation. Did the Federation just end up saying, well, we've got another refit we did of a Constitution class ship. Let's just because they didn't have time to build one.
No. And they weren't going to because they weren't going to, the Enterprise was going to be, disassembled for scrap.
Right.
So it does feel like, or they had one that had been in like before the cutoff date and had been fixed up.
Right.
Although the bridge is spotless. It's the brightest bridge we've seen.
It's
in
the closest
any of the
to the
movies.
Chris Pine Bridge there is. Yeah.
It does look a little bit like the Apple Store. It's not quite as shiny as the Chris Pine Bridge, but I think it was the Excelsior set painted differently because it was bigger. It just seemed bigger.
Again, I thought I had a picture of that and I can't find it. I don't think I do.
But it was interesting to see them in, because the bridges from the beginning of motion picture,
right?
They're maybe not as, they don't use as much black as they do currently, like on Discovery or Picard. But they tend to be like very moodily lit for the most part.
Yes.
The Grissom not so much. The Grissom was fairly well lit.
Right.
Maybe I'm just thinking of the Enterprise being sort of dimly lit because we got to see it in very sort of grim situations where there's where they're at red alert.
Right.
So none of them seem quite as bright as the original show.
Right.
Of course, they went way the other direction for this new Enterprise A because it is gleaming.
Right.
It looks like it just got back from a dental cleaning. But so I don't know. I don't know if they just took they were like, well, it could have been the USS, let's take off it's not the New Jersey, because we can see that in the Fleet Museum, but
Right.
some other, the Potemkin or the Congo or one of the other ships, and they
Yeah.
just gave it a new paint job,
Right.
and changed it.
Yeah, it just felt to me that they had to, they certainly, when I first saw the movie, I thought, oh, they built them a new ship.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, but then when I really think about it as an older person, I'm like, well, they didn't have time. I mean, I don't know how long in between the trial, and you don't really get an idea. It doesn't seem like they, a year and a half went by.
No.
So it feels to me like they had to have that ship laying around, and then they decided, you know what? He was such a swell. We're going to give him a Constitution class ship again and just paint Enterprise on it.
Yeah.
That'll make him happy.
Oh, yeah, and put an A.
Put an A. Right.
Put an A.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I think that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that the writers gave that much thought to that.
No, that is a pie eating contest happy ending.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I mean, there's certain things you can hand wave, because it's like, if you want to keep everything realistic, these films would be very dull, because it'd be a lot of like 6 months later, like, well, thank you for finally hearing, letting me. Thank you for the appointment, Admiral. I've been waiting for 6 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so on. It's
well, guys,
the speed of plot.
Yeah, we are 16 minutes over the hour.
What?
Yes, we are, because we love this movie so much. We just had a lot to say. But are there any other on the film? Are there any other thoughts you guys have before we sign out of here for this week?
At the time, well, I'll go reiterate what I said at the beginning. At the time I watched it, this was probably my favorite of the trilogy.
Right.
On rewatch, don't get me wrong, I still love this movie. I think this is a fantastic movie.
Right.
But now on rewatch, I think I would still have to go with, like everybody else, Wrath of Khan.
So yeah, I was going to ask you guys that, because now that we're into the fourth film, where you rank them all, and I would have to go, for me, Wrath of Khan, Voyage Home, Search for Spock, motion picture. That would be how.
Yeah, I would agree with that order.
I think that's how I would rank them as well.
Yeah.
This is, like I said, it is like you said, like Nimoy said, like it was more lighthearted and had some thoughts in it.
Right.
And it did bring awareness to the problem, the whaling problem.
Right.
I'm ashamed to say I don't know what the status of the humpback is. I don't know if although it was not about to go extinct, but it certainly was endangered.
Yes.
Yes. At the time, and it did bring a lot of positive sort of exposure to the issue, which I think helped.
Right. And just a few short years before this movie came out, when we were still in high school, our high school had a Save the Whales Club. Remember?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Say no more about that.
Yeah, we won't talk about that because it doesn't. We don't age well with that story.
No.
I feel like I need to hear that story when the show is over.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe in the exclusive Patreon content. Hey, speaking of which, we have not switched. We've put out a podcast version of this show, which has been being received pretty well, especially for one that's only been out for 3 episodes. We have a listener in Belgium who has continues to listen to the show, it seems, and we're thrilled. And it made me think, especially with people who are international, maybe they wouldn't know to tune in. They like listening to it as a podcast. They wouldn't know to tune into the live show. But again, maybe you can't tune into the live show, but you could email us. And we haven't talked about this in a long time. We have an email, TREK2 Nite, NITE, 2022 @gmail.com. That's TREK2 Nite, all one word, lowercase, 2022, the year we started, @gmail.com. And you can email us. We would love to get emails from you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
we will write you back personally. And
we'll read your letter on the air.
We'll read your letter on the air. Yeah.
We could start having a mailbag segment.
We could have a mailbag. Yeah.
But only if you write.
That's right. That's right. So just wanted to throw that out there again. We haven't talked about it in a long time, but especially for our podcast listeners, great way to communicate with us. You can also check out our Facebook page. So at any rate, before I lose my voice, I'm going to roll us out of here. Guys, have a great week. Next week, we come back to review Star Trek V.
The Final Frontier, I believe.
Yes, Final Frontier.
Yeah.
Directed by none other than William Shatner, our captain.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's the film that gives us the wonderful Cybok.
Yes.
Which I notice I have a hard time saying. I choked on it.
Yes.
At any rate.
That is definitely a movie I saw.
Yes, we will be back next week. I believe we're going to have a first-time co-host with us that week, Mike Robin, who you've seen comment here on the show several times. And I believe he will be our guest host for next week. We've talked about it.
Yes.
So at any rate, let's see if I can have a better chance of rolling us out of here with than I did starting the show. Hang on. Here we go. Hey, folks, have a wonderful week. See you next week here. Live long and prosper. And